You know, I'll never forget my old dad. When these things would happen to him, the things he'd say to me.
What did he say?
What the hell are you doing in the bathroom day and night? Why don't you get out of there? Give someone else a chance.
You are now succumbing to the Wadest Hits.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Now rocking. Young Frankenstein.
Welcome, bienvenue. Welcome to Wadest Hits, the show where I basically just kind of gush about shit that I like. Maybe shit that you like. You know, that's kind of the point of this whole thing. It's kind of a reaching out. Won't you grasp mine hand? Anyway, yeah. So, yeah, to start things off, not to give you a little peek behind the curtain on what you're missing here, but I originally was going to do an episode solely dedicated to Kevin Smith and his movies. Realized that would be a daunting task, especially when I'm kind of trying to find my voice and figure out how I'm going to do this podcast, you know. So, I figured instead of starting with my favorite filmmaker, we'll just start with my favorite movie, that of which is Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein is a Mel Brooks movie based on the 1931 Universal Monsters classic, Frankenstein, which is based on the Mary Shelley story. You know, that iconic Boris Karloff black and white thing. Young Frankenstein is kind of a parody of that movie, but very much the Mel Brooks style of parody or satire, what have you. This movie was actually filmed shortly after they stopped filming Blazing Saddles. He was kind of teaching Gene Wilder how to be a director while they were directing Blazing Saddles. There was a conversation that happened. Gene Wilder brought up, hey, I'd like to do a Frankenstein movie. You know, Mel Brooks was like, oh, it's been done. You know, there's son of, cousin of, you know, what have you. But Gene was like, okay, what about a movie, though, where it's the grandfather of the famous scientist, and he wants nothing to do with the family.
My grandfather's work was doo-doo!
And he's like, alright, that's kind of a funny project, or kind of a funny idea. So, yeah, they started running with it, started writing it. And so it's a Mel Brooks movie, but it's very much a labor of love on Gene Wilder's part in writing it. It was always my favorite movie when I was growing up. I think I called it Young Frankenstein. So when I was a kid, I said onion with like a hard G on it or something. Onion. I still can't say it right. But yeah, Young Frankenstein. So yeah, I've watched this movie since I was a kid. I've got to be close to triple digits. There was one night when I was staying over at my friend's girlfriend's apartment with him, and like they were sleeping in the other room, I was sleeping in the living room. They had a few DVDs there. One of them was Young Frankenstein. Either that or I brought it over. I can't remember. But I remember staying up all night because the place creeped me out. So I stayed up all night and watched every commentary track on that DVD. That's a little tidbit. I don't know where I was going with that, but I just felt like you needed to know. That's the kind of connection I have with this movie. There aren't many movies that I would stay up all night pounding PVRs, listening to the commentary tracks. Like, I watched this movie a good 5 or 6 times at night. I didn't have to. I enjoyed it. But yeah, like I mentioned, Gene Wilder's in this movie. It's his best movie, in my opinion. A lot of people, when they think of Gene Wilder, they think of Willy Wonka, but to me, he's always been Frederick Frankenstein. He inherits the castle, begins to kind of tinker with his grandfather's findings to similarly catastrophic results. I cannot talk. He's joined by Marty Feldman, who plays Igor, who's also the grandson of Victor's lab assistant, Victor Frankenstein. He has hilarious physical comedy throughout the movie with a hump and a certain kind of walk. He's a really cartoony type of character.
I ain't got no body, and nobody cares for me.
Terry Garr is also in this movie. She plays his lab assistant, Inga. She's got a super thick accent. Kind of talks like a decent doctor. Kind of, that type of thing. Really liked her in the movie After Hours as well. It's a Martin Scorsese comedy. We'll check that out. That'll probably be on Wadest Hits at some point, too. She auditioned for the role of Elizabeth, which was Frederick's wife in the movie, which eventually went to another Mel Brooks film mainstay, Madeline Kahn, who was the frontrunner for Inga at the time. So they kind of, did the old switcheroo there. Cloris Leachman, who's another legendary comedy actress, plays Frau Blucher. She's a groundskeeper of sorts. If most don't know her from her classics, they probably know her as Gam Gam and Beer Fest, the grandma character, or other roles in a lot of modern comedy. She does little things here and there. Oh man, Gene Hackman shows up as the blind man in one scene. Like one of my favorite scenes, actually. He actually acted for free in this movie, which is mind-blowing, given especially how funny he is.
Wait! Where are you going? I was going to make espresso.
And of course, Peter Boyle plays the creature. It's a mostly silent role because he's, a reanimated human body with an abnormal brain, or abnormal, as this movie puts it. But he still manages to make the role hilarious through his facial expressions and, again, like a lot of the physical comedy. This movie has a really authentic feel to it in regards to the source material. They also used a lot of the original laboratory equipment from the Universal Frankenstein movies, which were made by Ken Strickfaden, and that gave it a way more authentic feeling too. The big whirring machines with the flip switches, the arcs of electricity going up perpetually. And, because the movie's already parodying a film from 40 years prior, that kind of gives it a timeless feeling from the get-go that has never really gone away. I feel like this movie, its humor, it's kind of old-timey, but not in a bad way. It's just classic, good humor, And I feel like it really holds up nowadays. Columbia Pictures were opposed to shooting it in black and white, so Mel Brooks really had to plead for that to Alan Ladd Jr. And they still tried tricking him into shooting it on color stock so they could quote-unquote show it in Peru, but he shot that down immediately. He's, this is going to be on black and white, or we're not doing it, We're going somewhere else. Yeah, it's a really silly movie. There was a lot of care put into it. Gene made the movie on the condition that Mel Brooks wouldn't appear in it whatsoever, because they didn't want to break the immersion. So he ended up playing off-screen roles like the howling wolf and the shrieking cat during the dart scene. I love the dart scene so much. Inspector Kemp's wooden arm gags throughout the entire movie always kill me.
Up. A riot is an ugly thing. And I think that it is just about time that we had one!
There's a lot of good humor in this movie, but the movie was originally twice as long as it is.
I suggest you put on a tie.
And it required a super strenuous editing session to whittle it down to what it is now. They said that for every joke that worked, there were like 3 that fell flat. But I would still love to see what that looked like. Another little tidbit, Peter Boyle, again, who plays the creature, met his future wife on the set of this movie when she came to write an article on the filming for Rolling Stone. So that's kind of cool. Peter Boyle's great. He has a lot of iconic parts in this movie, like, his interaction with the blind man, Gene Hackman, and Putting on the Rich. That's probably the biggest one that we've kind of dancing around here. It's so iconic. I want a tattoo of them in the tuxedos eventually.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
It's funny because like he's intentionally singing the song bad in that scene, but Peter Bull is actually not a bad singer. You can kind of hear it in this part from "Everybody Loves Raymond" that always gets me.
I left my heart in San Francisco. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My wife thinks I'm in the bathroom.
So okay, yeah, why is this movie special to me? Why is this a Wadest hit and not just a movie that I like? You know, I think I've kind of alluded to it a lot during this. I mean, it's just the humor is timeless. The cast is absolutely fucking stacked. They, you know, all knew how to make each other laugh, and I think that in turn made it a funnier movie in the end. Seriously, watch like the gag reels of this at some point. They're so funny by themselves. It's an homage to movies that I love. I'm a huge fan of like the Universal monster classics and all that. You know, Frankenstein, Dracula, Invisible Man, shit like that. Wolfman. A lot of great care put into the set design and whatnot. Like I said, the authentic laboratory equipment, the castle set that they bought. There's this behind the scenes video that's kind of like a cast parade march where they're all coming down this like big ass like staircase, and it's so cool to just see a movie do practical stuff like that instead of, you know, green screen or whatever like they would probably do today. The genre bending is so good. It's like it's horror parts. It's kind of light on the horror aspect, but it's there. You know what I mean? Like there are some parts that are genuinely kind of unnerving, and of course it's very fucking funny. It's almost non-stop funny. The cast had so much fun filming it, matter of fact, that they added scenes to shoot at the end of the production just so they could keep going. So yeah, if you're a fan of Mel Brooks movies like Spaceballs and Blazing Saddles, stuff like that, you'll definitely be a fan of this. If you're a fan of Universal monster movies or just horror movies in general, you'll like it in that aspect. If you like any of these actors, they're on full display here. And if you like this movie, I would definitely recommend the rest of Mel Brooks movies, of course. Evil Dead would probably be another good one. It's a good horror comedy. A little more heavy on the horror in that one, but you know, never a bad thing. There's movies like that. Deadheads, that's another really funny like comedy zombie movie. Dracula, Dead and Loving It. It's out there. I don't need to tell you about about horror comedy. But yeah, I think that's probably all we got to say here. I think made my point, made my case here for this movie, why it's cool, why I think it's cool, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't. Either way, I appreciate you sitting through it. Before we go, here's one more part of the podcast that I thought would be kind of fun. Now, for the episodes like this, where it's just kind of me sitting here talking about it, I figured I'd share some opinions that my friends have given me on the particular topic. This week we just have one, but it comes from Andrew Armerspach, who's a really cool guy. He's in a band called Yard Sale out of Logansport and a bunch of different bands in that area. Cool guy. But here's his thoughts on Young Frankenstein. Quote, by and large, the greatest horror comedy of all time. Definitely stretching the meaning of horror, the Mel Brooks cinematic tribute/satire to black and white horror is one of the finest and funniest comedy films of all time, and 1000% earns its label as a genre staple. Where do I even begin? There has never been anyone better at playing sane yet completely insane and unhinged characters, like the late great Gene Wilder. He balances those states so well from one moment to the next, and so much of the film is carried by him. A beautiful touch, in my opinion, is the set design, which was the actual set from Universal's Frankenstein. Brooks gave them credit this time around. Yeah, like we were talking about earlier. It's awesome shit. It is absolutely stunning. Mel Brooks and company absolutely nailed the classic aesthetic of the 1930s horror. Young Frankenstein was the first Mel Brooks movie I saw all the way through, and though I now don't think it's the funniest or most well-written, those accolades going to Blazing Saddles and the producers respectively, I gotta say, respect to that. Love those movies. Young Frankenstein is still an amazing accomplishment in Brooks' most storied career. So thanks, Andrew, for that. I appreciate that. And if you would like to chime in on any of the topics that I cover, I'll usually put a little bit of a notice out, probably through Twitter or something like that, or Facebook, if you know me IRL. Yeah, I'll put a notice out, and if it's something you want to talk about, let's talk about it. I'm sure I'll have guests on episodes in the future as well, so it's not quite as rambly and more of a conversation. But yeah, this is a little small way to still involve people when they're not able to do that. So yeah, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I know this is a little bit of a rocky start, just because I just, didn't know exactly what I wanted it to be. Maybe I still don't, but we're doing it, right? We're doing it. We're doing it live! Yeah, go check out Young Frankenstein if you haven't. Night, kids.